Hello and welcome back, my partners in crime. Welcome back to Murder Analysed for another true crime. Now today's crime is solved. So it's a blessing, really. It's solved. It's a strange case, this really, and it's going to sort of go into a few different things. Listen, it is another murder and it is a dismemberment of a body. And you know, I think when we look at the perpetrator, it opens up this case into a wide range, really, of things, because not only is there murder in this case, but there is domestic abuse in this case, and it's not what you would think when I usually talk about domestic abuse, but there was. Now listen, today's case is the Gemma McCluskie case, and she was only 29 years old at the time of her death, and she was murdered by her brother, who was at the time 35, and his name was Tony McCluskie. Now, this was 2012, I think it was the 1st of March in 2012 that this girl was murdered, and her dismembered body then was found 5 days later in the Canal, in, like, you know, near Shoreditch area. It's quite a sad case, isn't it, really, when we think that, you know, we're talking about this girl that had a whole life ahead of her, right? She'd already been in EastEnders, 12 years actually before she was murdered. She'd starred in EastEnders and stuff, which is a show, and many of you may know EastEnders if you come from this country. If you're abroad, you may not have heard of it, but it's a show that's on, sort of, it was on every day, I think, for many, many years, and it's about EastEnders. Right, it's about the people that live in this community in EastEnders, and she starred in that. So listen, this girl was a vibrant girl. She had a life, you know, and the brother took it. So listen, this is the case of Gemma McCluskie.
The last time EastEnders actress Gemma McCluskie was seen before she disappeared, driving back to her flat in East London last March. Her brother Tony pleaded to the media while the search was on, but he had already killed her. This CCTV uncovered his trail of lies, showing him hauling a large heavy bag into the boot of a taxi, and here along the Regent's Canal, with Gemma's body thought to be inside. The next day, McCluskie was shopping in Tesco opposite his flat and had sent a text to his sister, which was described as breezy. But they had been arguing for some time over his cannabis use. This is the knife police believe he used to dismember Gemma. All her battered and bruised body parts were eventually found in the canal. Police said Tony McCluskie tried everything to avoid the finger of suspicion pointing at him. In court, he claimed he could not remember how he killed his sister, but the jury didn't believe him and found him guilty.
I suppose when we start on this case, we have to think about the murder itself. So on the 1st of March 2012, it's the same, because this is what this Tony is saying, because Gemma is no longer around to really tell us what's happened. It's throughout this trial of this man, you can see he was a liar and really tried to even dampen this girl's character, even after death. So we had Gemma, who lived with her mother, and her mother at the time of her death was in hospital. I think she had a brain tumour. And so she was in hospital, and you will see some photos of Gemma in the hospital, sitting at a show thing in the hospital. And then you had the brother Tony, who was 35 at that time, in 2012. Now, he had moved back into the mother's property because of a breakdown in relationship with another girl. So you had Gemma's mum, normally living in this flat in Shoreditch, East London. Then you had Tony that's moved in to this flat, but then you had Gemma's mother in hospital, so it only left Gemma and him in this property. Now, Gemma was a hard-working girl. She'd done other things and other jobs, you know. She was vibrant, she was happy, outgoing, had lots of friends, you know. She had plans for her future, whereas Tony, you see, didn't. It says here, really, and what's wrote about this man is that his addiction to drugs and skunk and marijuana and stuff, and he would smoke at least about 15 joints before he even got out of bed in the day. So we have two different characters here of people living in this property. Gemma was up and out, working, visiting her mother, doing everything she had to do, driving, you know, living life in London as you should. And you had this Tony that was the complete opposite, a waster of space, really, you can call him. because he couldn't keep a relationship going because of his drugs. He was a window cleaner and he couldn't do that either because he couldn't get out of bed to do it. So he was reliant on these people, really. And he says why he murdered Gemma. There was a row over a bath overflowing, because this man was probably so out of his head that he'd run a bath on the 1st of March 2012, sat down on the sofa to probably have another joint, and the bath's overflowing. So this Gemma's come in from doing what she's doing all day, working, living life, to find that this bloke is laying there out of his head and the bath's overflowing. This is sort of what he's saying happened. Then he says he got up and he grabbed her and he bashed her head a couple of times, right? Killing her. And then I suppose he thought, oh, what am I going to do with the body then, really? So rather than calling someone at that point and saying, I've accidentally murdered my sister because I'm a junkie and I can't do anything else, right? He doesn't do that. He soon sobers up and thinks, I'm going to chop her up and dump her body. So he gets a large knife, and you'll see the knife, and a meat cleaver, and he decides that he's going to decapitate her as well. We've had a lot of decapitations in the last few weeks on these videos. And then he's going to shove her in a suitcase. And then later at night, drag this body down the stairs, and you can see on CCTV what he's done. Drags this heavy suitcase with Gemma's dismembered body, decapitated head inside a suitcase, and then decides to put it in the taxi. And you can see the taxi driver come out, see if he needs any help. Of course he can't have this taxi driver touching, can he, the suitcase, because it's a dead body inside that suitcase. So it's a dead weight when it's heavy, and you can see by the CCTV that it's heavy. So he puts it in the taxi, and then he drives off. They drive off to another part, and you'll see this, where he then takes that body and drags that suitcase along the canal and then chucks her in. 5 days later, her body was found. And this is when this investigation started. But let's go back now to just after, the day after that Gemma was reported missing. Now you have the father, Anthony, and then you have the brother and lots of other people, because Gemma's got lots and lots of friends that are now looking for this girl. So they decide to meet in this pub and do a search themselves, because this is London, right? And sometimes if a girl like this has gone missing, really something is usually amiss. Someone that's usually social, can contact you and everything. But what he does, he starts to then manipulate her phone and send sort of different messages to her, saying, where are you, Gem? You know, all this sort of stuff, as if he hadn't done anything. Plus, he takes part in the search with his family and her friends to search for this young girl that he has already murdered and dismembered and chucked. So for 5 days, everyone thought, you know, they're looking for Gemma, but the killer was amongst them, and it was her own brother. So you can imagine, can't you, what's then happened when now the police, because the police have started an investigation straight away, and we've said, haven't we, before about London, it's very cameraed up, and even in 2012 it was cameraed up. It was cameraed up right outside them flats, because Gemma's flats had a car park underneath that really only tenants could use, so there was CCTV all over the place that caught every move that this sick man made. Every move. You could see everything. So he was caught quite quickly. 5 days. Once they found Gemma's body, they knew then that who had done it. Once he was arrested, of course he goes into denial mode, you know, diminished responsibility, all this sort of stuff, manslaughter, anything, saying it was her fault. She would hit him, she would do things to him, and he was just then, you know, attacking her back in self-defence, because it was just over an overflowing bath that she had lost her shit, and so in the end he killed her for it. But it doesn't justify, does it, when you think that this man can come out with this sort of crap, really. The police didn't believe any of it. I think with this case, when we're looking for a body and we found a body that's been chopped up and everything else, and then you find out that the brother has done it, this family must have felt absolutely devastated at this point about what had happened, because they haven't only lost their daughter or their sister, but a family member has committed this crime. Tony was their brother, was her brother. But then you see, as this trial goes on, we finally take him to trial, and he's just still saying a load of stuff, and he's trying to even, you know, her character to say about her, things about her, even after death, to save himself. Luckily, the jury didn't listen to any of that, because the CCTV really shows it all. And if it was an accidental murder or, you know, manslaughter, he didn't mean to do it, why then would you take that time to chop up that body, really, and, you know, discard her like she's rubbish into a canal in London? It just doesn't add up. But then as the time's gone on throughout this trial, things were coming out from Gemma's friends about the abuse that not only Gemma suffered but her mother suffered at the hands of Tony. He had been thrown out a few years before. The mother had thrown him out the house because of the abuse. It was often noted that Gemma had black eyes and had to wear dark glasses, and you can see most of the photos that this girl have taken of this girl leading up really to her murder. She was in dark sunglasses, and her friends were saying this was to hide the black eyes and the abuse that Tony was inflicting on her, the beatings. He also was very overpowering and controlling of her. She couldn't say if she was out in a club with her mates, he'd be ringing, "Where are you? Where are you?" He wanted that control. He liked control. And the ultimate control really in the end, isn't it, is when you murder someone and then you decapitate them. It's all about control with this man. So listen, the father has, you know, stuck by his son because he says he feels guilty for what he's done, the boy, Tony, and stuck by him. Now, when we have murders like this, it's a terrible thing for any family to have a child murdered or a sibling murdered. It's awful, isn't it? But you have to think, how awful then is it to find out that your son is the one that's done this murder? It's shocking. So I think take some time to think about, because I've been thinking about it. I was doing this case. I have children, and many of the people on here, you know, in our community have children, talk about their children. If one of your children ended up murdering somebody, it's hard enough to deal with, isn't it? Really? Because do you still support that person or not? Probably you would. As mothers and fathers and stuff, you would. But when that person turns out to murder your daughter, your sister, your brother, you know, then what? How then do you cope with that? Do you see what I mean? So I can understand Anthony McCluskie's want to support this boy because he says he feels genuine remorse, even though he didn't after it was done. I mean, he went shopping the next day to get some cleaning stuff and stuff. He had a massive drug habit, and drugs are no excuse. There's many people that take lots of marijuana and lots of skunk and everything else that don't go around dismembering bodies, especially their own families. They also do not go around being domestic abusers to their mother and their sister throughout a period of time, a long period of time. There was something else going on with this man. Definitely with this Tony. There was something else going on. Now, he was Gemma's older brother because he was 35 at the time of her death and she was 29. Was it envy, jealousy? What was it? Because this girl seemed to have it all in her life. Hard-working girl, right? Early years 12 years prior, she was a star on a really hit TV show in this country. So was it jealousy? Was it envy that really he hated her for? But then that doesn't really give us the answers to why he was also abusive to the mother, does it? Because, you know, Gemma, you could think, okay, she was a younger sibling, he'd probably always bullied her, his character was that of a bully, but it was this control that he wanted over her, where she was, who she was with, and this beatings and everything he'd give her. But also it tells you something about Gemma, because Gemma didn't go and seek help for that. Her friends would tell her, you know, you need to seek help for this. It's not appropriate. It's not normal that your brother should be giving you black eyes and should be ringing you in nightclubs and find out who you're with, whether you're with another man. So there was something more going on in this relationship, in Tony's mind, towards Gemma, without a doubt. There really was. And I think that is the real reason for the murder. The overflowing bath is only what he's telling you happened. I think there's a lot more in that man than he's going to tell you, but he just won't say it. But coming back to the father has got a, you know, the thing is, when you're trying to get over a murder, you found the body, you've now buried this person, and you're trying to then move on, right? That's normally what happens with murder secondary victims, the families of people left behind. They can not release from it, but for them there's an ending, and then the grief then just takes its time. But when you have a murder like this, where you have a man that's in your family, that you was close to, that you couldn't believe had done that to her, you then have to sort of compartmentalize, you know, make sure that you think Gemma's on this side and now we've got Tony here, because Gemma's gone, not coming back. And so the father's trying now to deal with, and the family to deal with, a murderer in their family. But a murderer in their family who's killed their own child, or their own brother, or sister of her other brother. It's shocking, really, and it's so difficult, isn't it, when you think, how would you cope? What would you do in that situation? Do you know, murder's a terrible thing, and I keep saying this, murder has so many victims, really. Not just the main victim, the primary victim, but the secondary victims. Listen, these people will never get over this murder, because they can't. Because Tony got 20 years. And this Tony deserves to the minimum of 20 years. He deserves to spend every day of that in prison, without a doubt. Every day of it. Because what he done, he took a young girl's life, a 29-year-old girl's life, his own sister's life, in a horrendous way, really. We don't really know what happened to Gemma, but her body was more than just bruised and battered when they found this body, right? So it wasn't just a couple of bangs to the head and I've killed her. He beat her to death and then dismembered her. The evidence, the post-mortem evidence, shows that. It shows that in his drugged up state. That's what it shows. But then how drugged up and how much of a state was you in to be able to get a large knife and a meat cleaver, chop this girl up, decapitate this girl, and put her in a suitcase, go to the shops, do what you've got to do, and get rid of this body? You know, it doesn't add up with Tony in this case. It doesn't. I think Tony is a very dangerous man. And I think, yes, I agree with the father, if that's what he wants to do as a father, is to stick by his son. But I think what the son really needs to do is be more honest. And actually, even the family, I suppose, when you sit down and you think about this case, because we are not them, right? We cannot feel what it's like to have your own child murder your other child. It's very difficult. And as I say, what would you do? What would you do? How difficult is it to disown someone once they've done that, when it's your own child? But he was in the courtroom, the father. He was in the courtroom. They heard it all. But he still says that he will support his son. And for that, you've got to give the man credit. You really have. I've never been in that situation. I don't know what I would do in that situation. My character is much more harder, I think, than that when it comes to these sort of crimes. If this boy had had some form of mental health or ever illness that would have created this situation, that may be different. But drugs is not an excuse to murder and dismember someone. Drugs is not an excuse. This man already had a history of violence, of domestic abuse against not only the mother, but also the sister, his own sister, for many, many years. It shows you what sort of character this man is. He hasn't told the truth. He's tried to blame Gemma all the way through for her own murder. That's what he tried to do. The judge said, you know, really, it's a despicable crime because not only have you murdered this girl, you've tried to take her character with her. You know, it was absolutely madness what was going on in this court, really, with this man. He's a terrible man, and he deserves every day that he spends in prison. Longer than 20 years. Longer than 20 years. Because if you could do this to your own sister, what else could you do? And it was no wonder that his relationships with women didn't work out. Because of this controlling behaviour, this violent behaviour. He was a violent man. And that violence and that domestic abuse ended in the murder of Gemma. Now, when we talk about domestic abuse, we usually talk about partner domestic abuse, don't we? Husband, wife, you know, whatever, whether it's the wife committing or the female committing the act or the male committing the act of domestic violence. But, you know, there is domestic violence where it's about siblings also abusing their parents and also abusing their other siblings. That is really well known, really, and it's not as highlighted as much because it doesn't always end in murder. It doesn't. But in this case, this is what I really think happened in this case. This man was a domestic abuser, and in the end, this is why Gemma died. Because she was known to have black eyes. She was known to be beaten by this boy. When her body was found, yes, it was chopped up, yes it was, but it was bruised and battered. He had battered this girl to death. That's the real truth about Gemma McCluskie's murder. How he then chopped her up and threw her in a canal like she was nothing. Because to Tony McCluskie, she was nothing. She wasn't. He had that control over her whole life. And in the end, that's what really killed Gemma. So when we talk about domestic abuse, it's really important that you seek help for domestic abuse, right? Whether it's coming from a sibling, a partner, whoever it's coming from. It's unacceptable behaviour, and it can end in this sort of a crime. It really can, and it often does. Often does. So at the end of this video, as always, I'm going to put up some information for you to ring if you need help. But listen, I keep saying, when it comes to domestic abuse and people that are suffering from domestic abuse, you are not alone. There are agencies out there to help you. There are people out there to help you, right? And you belong to no one. Now, if this mindset of these people that are being abused, we can change that mindset, that you belong to no one, no matter how much you think you love this person, no matter how much you don't want to get these people into trouble, right? You belong to no one. You have your own rights. You're your own person to choose what happens to you. That's even in domestic abuse. So you need to do something about it. Talk to someone. Don't suffer in silence. It's not good. It will never end well. It will never end well. So listen, 11-1 majority, right? Put this man away. 11-1, the jury. 11-1. I think it should have been, 12. Really. I don't know what the other one was thinking. So listen, we had this man, didn't we? He admitted to murdering her and he wanted to go for manslaughter. That was thrown out. He was done for murder and in the Old Bailey. And that was done in 2013 when he actually went to court. And yeah, he's going to, I think, minimum 20 years and deserves every day of it. I keep saying that because he does. He does. Someone along the line would have always been hurt where this man was. Some woman, some child, something would have been in danger of this man because he was an abuser of women. That's what he was. If you could abuse your own sister and your mother, then you are an abuser of women, and you need to be really, sorted out or sort yourself out. It's not an excuse to say that, oh, I smoked loads of drugs. Lots of people, I actually thought marijuana actually calmed you down, didn't it? I did. I thought it calmed you down. Obviously, it didn't do it with this man because he smoked so much of it. But then you got to think, he was a window cleaner. He wasn't even getting out of bed to do that. Where was he getting the money? Probably from Gemma and the mother. Now, the mother was in hospital, as I've said, and she had a brain tumour. And she does know about Gemma, but since then, really, this woman is bedridden, really, and she really can't comprehend anymore what's going on. So I feel really sorry for her. But with any murder, these lives that are ruined here, you've got a family now destroyed. You've got a family ripped to pieces by this sadistic murder of this man, of what he did to this girl, his own sister. Shocking, isn't it, really? I do feel for the family, and I can understand where the dad's coming from. I can, right? I can, as a mother, I can. I think when we talk about the father and the family having to cope with such a thing, with this man, this Tony, in prison, you've now got a father that's having to go and see this man weekly or monthly, or however he's getting a pass, to go and see him, knowing what he'd done. Now, lots of people in prison, when they are caught for these and prosecuted and sent to prison for these murders, this sort of crime, always feel guilt. Of course they do. Because is it guilt, though, that he's been caught? Or, what is it? Because I don't think he's got any remorse for what he did to Gemma. I don't believe that at all. I just don't. I don't. I think he probably thought it was another beating. Yeah, he may not have meant to have killed her, but he was definitely beating her. He was definitely beating her. But then how long can you, beat someone and, really, have this obsessive behaviour over someone, your sister, without the end result being bad? There's never going to be a good result here in the end. I think with the father and the family, it's so difficult for them, and I understand where this father's coming from. I really do, because many of us are mothers and fathers on here. And what would you do? I'd like to know in the comments, what would you do? If this was you had your sibling, your son murdering your daughter, what would you do? And it's easy for us to say, oh, throw away the key and this, that and the other. But they're your children, aren't they? And we don't know Tony or Gemma, really, as much as they do. Right? We don't. We know what we've read in the case and stuff like this, but we don't know everything about that. But what I've read, I must say, and I've read a lot on this case, because I didn't know about the domestic abuse within this household when I first started doing this case. I thought it's a straightforward murder, tell you the truth, a straightforward murder and decapitation, and another bloke just decided to kill someone. But when you look deeper into this case, when you really analyse this case for what it is, there's a lot more going on here within this domestic abuse side of it, with this obsessive behaviour from Tony towards Gemma. There is a lot more going on, and it would be very interesting if we could find out more about that relationship, really, because it's it's a strange relationship. But all domestic abusers like to control, and many people that are being abused never say anything. They don't. They never say anything. So for Gemma to wear her dark glasses and everything, she was hiding that, but she was telling her closest friends about what was going on. She really was. Now, we don't know that morning, when she's got back, or that afternoon when she's got back home, maybe the bath was overflowing. Maybe she said to him, get out, I've had enough. Because Gemma's now 29 and probably had enough of being beaten, to tell you the truth. She's probably had enough of it. Her mother's in hospital, probably not coming out anytime soon. You know, you're looking after this man. You know, this is probably what's happened in there. And now he's pissed off, isn't he? You're telling me what to do. I'm the older brother. You seem to have it all. You're not going to control me. And then starts to beat her again. And I think this is really what's happened in this place. But he won't say. You see, his story is, it was a bath overload. I only hit her a couple of times. You know, bashed her head twice, I think he said. No, the body shows a lot more damage to it than that. It does. Before the, you know, dismemberment of it, there was a lot more bruising than this on this girl's body than that. It shows that this man was a domestic abuser and then ended up in murder. I think that's really this case summed up. That's really it. But a young girl, 29, good little actress, probably would have got more parts and different stuff, you know, hard-working, family girl, lots of friends, had her whole life in front of her, taken pretty away by a junkie, a brother who was absolutely no good. And my opinion, and I can't say if he was my son, I can't, what I would be thinking, but I would be heartbroken really to think that that was going on. That, you know, I'm sure that if, you know, if I was the mother and I was being beaten by my son and my daughter was being beaten by my son, I would have said something many years before. I know she threw him out, the mother, but then allowed him back in because his circumstances have changed. You know, I still can't think of what I would do. I just can't, because we're not in that situation. But I think I probably wouldn't have allowed it to get that far. Do you see what I mean? So I feel for this family. I do. I have absolutely contempt for Tony McCluskie. I think he's exactly where he deserves to be. I think the jury was right, the judge was right, the case was right. The police done a great job. They got him quite quickly, but let's be honest, right? The man wasn't that, you know, mastermind criminal here, was he? The whole thing was cameraed up and everything was caught on camera. What he was good at, though, his manipulation skills, was in them 5 days of when Gemma was murdered, really, laying in that canal, you know, like a bit of rubbish, where he was in the pubs and out searching, part of the search group, texting Gem, oh Gem, where are you? You know, played the part well, didn't he? Played the part well, really thought he was going to get away with murder. He really did. He really did. But he didn't. Because not many of them do. They really don't. And I've said before, when you're trying to get away with murder, it's so difficult, especially in London, because they are cameraed up. And if you are taking a suitcase, dragging a suitcase to try and put it in a taxi from the apartment or the flat where your sister and you lived, and she's never been seen since, it's obvious that the police are going to think, what's in that suitcase? So then they're going to follow that taxi on CCTV to find out where you've been, and then you can see you dragging a suitcase along the river bank, right, the Canal bank, and throw it in, and the next time you're seen, you haven't got the suitcase. So now they know, 1, you've probably murdered this person, 2, the route you've took, 3, where you've dumped the body. That's all they need to know. So this is no mastermind criminal here, right? This is a domestic abuse case gone wrong for Tony, really. And Gemma lost her life. That's really what this case is about. Other than that, what can you say about this man? Absolutely nothing. I think absolutely nothing. There's not one good word that you can say about this man. So I really feel for the family here. I do, because I feel for all secondary victims when it's a crime like this has happened. But my gosh, you know, there's no end now to these people's grief. There's no end, because their murderer, the person that got justice for their daughter's murder, really, the person that's seen the justice handed down to them, is their own son. And this is what makes this case really terrible for them as a family. because there's no ever getting over this. There's no way. There's no way. So listen, this is the Gemma McCluskie case. Very sad case, 2012, Shoreditch, East London. And, you know, rest in peace, Gemma, because I think finally, this girl might have some peace. Finally. So thank you for watching. Until the next time. Bye-bye.